Hello, I'm Robert Godwin Jones from Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm very happy to be presenting at Eurocall, but I'm sad not to have had the opportunity to be in Iceland. I'm going to be talking about chatbots today and offering a different perspective than I think is evident in the consensus in call research these days on chatbots. I won't be reporting on a specific experimental study, but my presentation is more theoretical in nature and looking at current developments in AI-based chatbots, voice systems. And it's contrarian in the sense that it runs against what I see as a consensus that these days in research on chatbots that open systems are not optimal for language learning, and I'm going to be arguing the opposite, namely that while scripted rule-based chatbots designed for language learning can be quite effective, especially in a structured learning environment, there is an opportunity, I think, and specifically looking at current developments in intelligent personal assistants like Siri, there's an opportunity, I think, for autonomous language learning, and particularly outside of the classroom, that these systems provide that's quite exciting and that offers an alternative perspective, I think, on how these voice systems fit into second language acquisition theory. So I'm proposing looking at open dialogue systems as kind of the future of chatbots for language learning. And that involves an evolution of the role of these systems from the role of tutor, language tutor, and that obviously is the role that it plays in, for example, tutorial call and iCall systems, to the role of companion, so a social role. And as I'll explain, this is based on a different perspective on language and language development that's dynamic and usage-based. So we have chatbots going back a long ways, and these have been under constant development, but particularly in recent years, there have been developments through artificial intelligence and large language models that have really made dramatic advances in terms of the abilities of chatbots. But it goes back to experimentation with tutorial call in the 1980s. And these were, and still exist, these rule-based systems that originally were highly scripted and used pattern matching, and today are much more sophisticated. And there are dedicated chatbots for language learning. Duolingo, for example, has such a chatbot. And there are others. Mondly is one that where there's been quite a bit of research on its use. And there's also the opportunity to use general purpose bots that are configured for language learning. Cleverbot, for example, in studies that I listed there on that page. The alternative to those dedicated systems are systems that are widely in use today, like Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa. These are these intelligent personal assistants, voice-based systems that are used in a great variety of ways by many people, that are accessible in a variety of devices, most commonly probably on mobile devices, on cell phones. And they offer the opportunity to engage in conversation with an AI system that can give specific information, but also can be problematic in terms of not providing reasonable responses to inquiries or non sequiturs in response to user input. There's also the problem of recognizing non-standard voices, dialects, for example, or learner language specifically. Despite that, there have been a number of studies, such as those I list here, using these IPAs, these intelligent personal assistants, for language learning that have shown positive results. And this is particularly the case for at the novice level and for learners who don't have opportunity to engage in conversation locally. So they have this opportunity to engage with a chatbot that provides conversational practice, and studies have shown that for learners this can be a fun, stimulating, and motivating experience, and that it encourages students to try out their language skills. And the studies have shown that, as one could predict, that most of the experiments have been done with students practicing pronunciation, conversational practice, but there have also been studies that have looked at uses of these IPAs in other skills, such as reading and writing, and that's particularly through these add-ons, so-called skills. That's particularly the case with Amazon's Alexa, that can add on to the functionality, the built-in, the default functionality of an IPA. And the results have been generally positive. Some issues with students becoming frustrated when their responses are not understood by the system. There's been little experimentation, or at least research, published research, on using these systems by autonomous learners, although that seems to me and to a lot of other researchers as kind of a golden opportunity for language learners, because it does offer a system of a conversational partner with infinite patience, and allows a learner to try out his or her language and to engage in conversation. However, these systems are not designed for multi-turn conversation. They're designed to function as transactional agents. That is to say, to give specific responses, information to user queries, and aren't really built to engage in extended conversations with the users. So what's needed for these systems to be more effective for language learning? I would say there are three things in particular. And the interesting thing to me is that we're already seeing these systems move in these directions. So the first is there needs to be a persistent record of transactions between the system and the user, so that a learner profile is built up. That's something that's always been there in tutorial call and iCall systems. And that we're seeing, for example, in Xiao Ice, which is a chatbot developed by Microsoft Asia, that's very interesting. In that it does keep a record of transactions, of interactions between the system and the learner. And there's been studies that we're using that system of conversations lasting as long as half an hour, and over the studies that show use of that system over a period of months. And so the advantage there, obviously, is that the system learns about what the user is interested in, and can gather information on that, on hobbies, for example, sports, favorite writers, favorite movies, whatever it might be. And so that's much more interesting for the user then to have conversations with the system. The second thing that's needed is the system needs to seem not as machine-like, more human-like. And so the ability, for example, to engage in small talk. And the voice there and the voice exchange needs to be more human-like. And we're already seeing that in these IPAs. For example, in Google Duplex, which is capable of, which is an add-on to Google Assistant, which has very human-like a voice, even with hesitations, disfluencies, and so forth. It sounds remarkably human-like. By the way, the Xiao Ice, one of the aspects of that particular chatbot is that it uses different profiles in different countries. So it's been widely used in China, and the profile there is a young female. There, a more human-like interaction is possible there. And the third thing, I think that the third development that would improve the possibility of using IPAs for language learning is recreational opportunities. And there's been experimentation with this in storytelling, but I think the big area here for future development is in gaming, where I already have chatbots extensively used in gaming environments, and I think this is something I think that will be very interesting in terms of language learning and gaming. So I'm looking at what Hearn in her study from 2019 calls using chatbots for conversations for learning. So most call implementations of chatbots are controlled practice. So there's a very controlled environment, which is done in a variety of ways. Often there'll be a built-in kind of question and answer format or other constraints on the conversation in these dedicated systems. If you have an open system like an IPA, it's less predictable, but at the same time, it's more like human conversation that can go in a lot of different directions. The big advantage to me of moving in this direction for language learning in open systems is that you have these chatbots on the IPAs that are available in a variety of systems, a variety of ways, not just on cell phones, but for example, on smart speakers in the home, but also in cars, for example. And we're seeing this Internet of Things where more and more voice systems are being built into a variety of devices. One of the exciting developments along these directions in terms of the ability of chatbots to engage in conversation in a variety of domains are these large language models. They've gotten a lot of press in recent years, GPT-3 and Lambda, for example, that are moving towards artificial general intelligence, AGI. That is the ability of a system to engage with users in conversation in a wide variety of domains. And that's because these large language models are based on very large data collection. And so the other thing that's moving in the direction of greater usefulness of these open systems is the naturalness and mechanics of conversational exchanges that I talked about, for example, with Google Duplex. One of the options here, I think, in terms of future developments, is for language learning to take a large language model and add on to that. And Hearn's study in 2019, for example, adds on a learner corpus to a standard language learning model a large language model and makes it more useful specifically for language learning. And that study I think is very interesting in that sense. So the what I'm advocating is looking at the use of chatbots from the perspective of ecological calls. So looking at the complex inter relationship between individual machine and environment, which is constantly evolving as the system learns about the user and the user interacts with the system, and the user develops language skills not only through that system but other resources that are the system that the learner is likely exposed to. And I think looking at it at the interaction there with chatbots from the perspective of complex dynamic systems and also socio-materialism, I think gives us a better understanding of what's going on there. And I think what we're seeing there is that this is second language development, not acquisition, in the sense that there's no end goal, and this is a constantly evolving process, and that there's a complex language learning system that users typically are engaged in that involves potentially both formal and informal, but most importantly, explicit and implicit language learning, incidental language learning, obviously, which is what these chatbots offer fundamentally. So in conclusion, I would say that these chatbots, and particularly these open systems, enable great opportunities, particularly as they develop those features that I talked about in the presentation. And that what we're likely to see is a variety of individual learning trajectories that where learners use these tools, these systems, these chatbots, in combination with a great variety of other resources, and which makes the learning trajectories difficult to predict and nonlinear. Learners are likely to learn language in a great variety of ways. As always, when you're talking about artificial intelligence, one has to add a cautionary note in terms of the privacy concerns, the ethical concerns in terms of how data has been collected for these AI systems, for these large language models, which typically excludes minority voices and is limited linguistically as well. One might point to the fact that the leading research is done in English, and so advances are likely to be seen first in English, and for a long time only in English, and with the other languages catching up slowly. Thank you very much.